Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Shreyas, and I represent the Pipeline Safety Institute, also known as PSI, the training division of RCP. We focus on delivering practical and high quality training on DOT pipeline safety regulations. Today, I'll be facilitating this webinar. On behalf of RCP and the Pipeline Safety Institute, I welcome you all to this webinar on class location change requirements for gas transmission pipelines based on the final rule published on January 14th, 2026, with an effective date of March 16th, 2026. This session will cover key aspects of the rule, including applicability, regulatory expectations, and practical implementation considerations for pipeline operators. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. Mr. Chris McLaren, Executive Consultant at RCP, is a highly respected expert in the pipeline integrity management. With over 3 decades of experience, he has extensive expertise in integrity assessments, risk analysis, and corrosion control. And he has worked closely with operators to align their programs with federal and state regulations. Joining him, Mr. Derek Wallace, a senior GIS analyst at RCP. Derek is an experienced GIS professional who has worked with several oil and gas companies. He leads GIS effort at RCP, supporting HCA identification, risk assessment, class location analysis, underwater inspection, and NPMS and RRC submittals, along with other spatial analysis projects. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please keep yourself on mute during this session. We will have a dedicated time at the end for the Q&A. You may submit your questions in the Q&A section on the top of the screen. Once we address those, we also give you an opportunity to raise your hand and we call your name. You can unmute and ask questions directly. We will also share the presentation via email and provide access to this recorded session. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris and Derek to walk us through the class location change requirements and what operators need to know.
Thank you, Shreyas. Appreciate that intro. I'm Chris McLaren with RCP, and we'll be breaking to Derek here in a little bit when we look at some of the graphics on class location change. So this final rule was issued January 14th, and it only had a 60-day effective window. That's pretty quick. And then from March 16th, the rule became effective, and it's got a 2-year window here that we need to be conscious of. So we tried to be responsive and get this webinar out quickly because a lot of these timeframes are fairly rapid. You can see the listing of the rule. It's almost 50 pages. And an important thing is that in that center column are the topics that are covered in the Federal Register notice in the final rule. And if you have some specific questions, and we'll be covering a few of those areas that have some discussion by PHMSA later, but that's where you could go to that topic and find more information. There's also a link there that you could see to go get that Federal Register notice. You may use the electronic code of federal regulations, though. And the interesting thing about it is that if you had gone to the ECFR prior to March 16th, the new rule revisions would not have been included. But after March 16th, once it's effective, the ECFR will start putting those revisions in the code. So I think that's always of note. In today's webinar, we're going to focus on the intent of the rule, and then we're going to talk about the applicability or the eligibility of segments, how they can get access to be able to utilize the new method for class location and MAOP confirmation. There's new provisions and criteria, and that's under the 192.611A4 section that is new. There's also been a revision to D to deal with and discuss the restoration of MAOP. And those are all very interesting topics. We'll talk about key regulatory provisions, and more specifically about this integrity management alternative to eligible Class 3 segments. This rule is based on extensive experience that PHMSA has had with special permits, and we'll talk about that. But it is utilizing integrity management principles to manage this class upgrade. So the final rule allows operators to use integrity management an alternative to address certain class location changes, like for when the class is changed from a class 1 to a class 3 or a class 2 to a class 3. And this new A4 option, this new fourth method, is rather than the A1 through A3 methods of pipe replacement, pressure reduction, or retesting. And the modeling of the rule on PHMSA special permits and waivers program that's been going on since the Subpart O integrity management regulation was implemented in the early 2000s. It has been a great experience and test bed for how to do this. Since 2004, there's been 46 special permits issued, and the majority of them are still in place, and there has never been a leak or a rupture on a segment that is in the special permit that has been active in it. And that's a pretty good track record. So this alternative requires a lot of those baseline and recurring safety measures to maintain that pipeline integrity as the population increase has encompassed in a previously designed and installed pipe. There's also these eligibility requirements for that applicability that we'll talk about. But first, I'll turn it over to Derek Wallace.
Thanks, Chris. I'm sure all of y'all are aware of most of our class location classifications, but we figured we'd give a little refresher on kind of what some of those thresholds are that change our class. For our class 1 pipeline, we're looking at 10 or less buildings intended for human occupancy in that 660-foot buffer. For our next jump, it'll be our greater than 10 but less than 46. So, you start hitting a little more urban areas. And we'll jump to our next slide, in which we'll see our class 3, which is going to be our more than 46 buildings intended for human occupancy, or if we have our pipeline lies within 100 yards of a well-defined identified site. So this could be a playground, recreational area, outdoor theater, a place that is occupied by 20 or more people at least 5 days a week for 10 weeks in any 12-month period. So obviously those weeks don't need to be consecutive. And these are, as always, who's ever doing your analysis should verify occupancy on some of these buildings to verify that. Another one is our class 4 areas, and this is going to be kind of our downtown metropolitan areas where we have our 4 stories or greater. That'll bump us up to class 4. Then we'll jump over to an example we have of a class 1 pipeline. This is located just outside of Houston in Katy, Texas. And as you can see, whenever this pipeline was constructed, we were in fields and farming land. Then fast forward, as growth occurs, we're now dead center in a growing master plan community. So these changes happen quick. And luckily with this change that Chris will get into in this next slide, it allows operators some options. So I'll hand it back to Chris.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, that change from class 1 to 3 happens rapidly. And that's what the special permit process was designed to do. And after 20 plus years of experience with it, I'm glad that that PHMSA was finally able to codify this new section 192.611A4. So we had a great example there of a class 1 pipe designed, installed, operated for some time at a 72% design factor for a class 1, but then it rapidly incurred a class location change. In this case, it was the top line going straight to a class 3. And so the previous options were to reduce the MAOP per 192.611A2, replace the pipe, or get a special permit. Well, that's now been replaced with the new 192.611A4 method. Also, some areas incur slower change and may end up going to a class 2, and operators will typically pressure test their pipeline to the one class above pressure requirement. In this case, the pressure test was conducted to a 1.25 times MAOP pressure. And that's really the basis of a lot of this rule. That's another requirement, is that baseline pressure test per subpart J be to 1.25. Well, in that case, the operator could have taken what's known as a one class bump and maintained their current pressure as it went to class 2. But now as it grows more to class 3, they must implement the new A4 to maintain their pressure. There's also some pipe designed to class 2. And if they incurred a population growth and a class change to class 3, there's a few methods that they could use to accommodate that. The first one being the central line, which would utilize the new fourth method, which would be I had a pressure test greater than 1.25 MAOP, and I could use the new 192.611A4 methodology to get to a class 3 operation. Or if it was designed to class 2 and they had done the pressure test to 1.5 MAOP, they could utilize the one class bump and maintain their current pressure up into class 3. The other option, if they didn't have the 1.5 pressure test, is to reduce pressure commensurate with the design. So to get into this program, for it to be applicable, we have some new definitions. And I think within the rule, it talks about this gateway into the rule, and the reason the rule is designed the way it is. It's very efficient, and I think that's a really great thing. We are due some simplified, more efficient rules. The first thing is that this eligible segment is going to be capable of being assessed with an inline inspection tool. It must be piggable. So we talk about a class 3 inspection area that's from the upstream tool launcher to the nearest downstream tool receiver. And so it must be able to be assessed by ILI. Really, the improvements to the integrity management rule in Subpart O in the last 6 years, ending in 2022, and a lot of the success of the special permit has been the continued improvement of inline inspection to identify axial flaws, cracks-like defects, and other integrity concerns, and remediate those prior to they're resulting in a failure. Some of the things that are not able to be utilized in this new rule to become a eligible class 3 segment is mainly done by omission. It can't be bare pipe. Bare pipe has never been considered part of an acceptable pressure upgrade as class has increased. And wrinkle bends. Wrinkle bends are very difficult to inspect with ILI, if not at all improbable to be able to detect the appropriate defects. There is some verbiage in the preamble about that an operator could submit for a special permit if their pipe contained wrinkle bends and go through that special permit process. Success is unlikely, but if the wrinkle bends were a very low amplitude, such that you had ILI results that showed that you were effectively seeing metal loss and any other threat integrities sufficient to assess the low amplitude wrinkle bends, that might be something an operator would consider, but I think most typically wrinkle bends exclude that pipe from becoming an eligible class 3 segment. The other two are about the type of pipe. The pipe formed with a seam formed by lap welding or with a longitudinal joint factor below 1 are not eligible to join. Now, a couple of the items that are now part of eligible for the rule are the low frequency ERW, the direct current electric resistance weld, and electric flash welded pipe. Those can now apply, or they can now enter into the class 3, an eligible class 3 segment. And that is primarily due, particularly over the last several years, to the improvements in ILI technology and the assessment, detection, and reading by the ILI providers. They've done an exceptional job, and we now have high confidence in that seam being identified for any defects such as cracks or crack-like features, axial flaws, selective seam weld corrosion, and other things. One of the things that will keep a pipeline out of being eligible is if it's experienced an in-service leak or rupture due to cracking in the body, seam, or girth weld. And that would include segments that are within 5 miles of it that have similar characteristics, similar pipe, similar coating, similar environmental conditions, anything within that 5 miles. And you'll see the effect of leaks and ruptures on this rule extensively as we end up towards the end of this discussion. Again, these criteria have been shown to be effective and provide safety in the fact that no in-service leaks or ruptures have occurred on segments managed under the current special permit process. So let's look at A4. It's the new method. First off, it will be included in Subpart O in your integrity management program. That includes the risk assessment, the integrity assessments, remediation, and other activities that go on normally within an integrity management program. And then there are initial requirements, and here we start seeing the dates again. So we have effectively 2 years to perform the initial requirements on a pipeline that has experienced this population growth around it and going from a class 1 or 2 to a class 3. Or within 24 months of the date of the class location change, and whichever of those is later, an operator must complete those initial program requirements. And then following that, there's going to be recurring requirements, such that then after the 2028 date, the operator must comply with these following programmatic requirements. So we've got the integrity management program, then we have initial requirements, there's 8. Then we have recurring requirements. There's 9, and those are the things that that we're going to have to be most conscientious about. Here are the 8 initial requirements. We have to perform a baseline assessment using an ILI tool and remediate all the identified defects. And we'll talk about a special some extra remediation requirements. But it's those immediate 1-year conditions must all be remediated prior to the end of that 2 years. We must confirm we have a pressure test or perform one to at least 1.25 MAOP per Subpart J, all the requirements of it, 8 hours, etc. Hopefully we've got our TVC records done, and we have to confirm all that TVC documentation and or perform that work. We must install rupture mitigation valves upstream and downstream of the segment. That also applies to the crossovers and laterals per the rupture mitigation valve rule. One of the big things to note here, though, is that it's based on the original design of the pipeline. So if we looked at that class 1 design pipeline that Derek showed earlier, hopefully it would have valves at least every 20 miles. And so those would be the valves that we would be required to automate and to be able to close within 30 minutes per the RMV rule. We must install CP test stations, a maximum of half-mile spacing. And then here's we'll talk about a number of these later, but here's one where if I can't get that half-mile spacing because of restrictions, that I would need some justification and documentation of why I can't. But it's every half mile for test stations unless there's some restriction or obstacle in your way. I need to perform depth of cover survey and correct any deficiencies to the original design requirements of the pipeline. And if there are areas where lowering or other adding of cover is not appropriate, the preamble does talk about allowing for safety barriers or concrete pads to ensure that the damage prevention is mitigated or minimized. And that's another place where we'll talk about with records. I would need to have some justification. Damage prevention is one of the things that PHMSA is concerned about ILI not covering well. So we'll see on our recurring requirements how some of these damage prevention area, depth of cover, and then right-of-way surveys, et cetera, are very important. Must perform a coding survey. So we need to do a ACVG, DCVG coding survey and remediate it per the 192-461 sections F through H, ensuring the coding is suitable. That's been a big push in the previous special permit work, is the suitability of the coding. And then if I'm going to be confirming the MAOP under the new fourth method, I must notify PHMSA per 192.18. Excuse me again. So those are the initial requirements. Then we have recurring requirements. So the code is laid out fairly efficiently. I had A41 initial, A42 is now my recurring. And there are 9 of these recurring requirements. We'll look at some of the differences between what this requirement is in the current code in a little bit, but let's talk through them to start with. Gas quality requirements, there's limits on water, CO2, and hydrogen sulfide. Have to have similar to FERC requirements to minimize the occurrence of internal corrosion. And to follow up on that coding survey I performed, I need to do a close interval survey every 7 years. And to deal with the damage prevention issue, right-of-way patrols are each month. Leakage surveys need to be required at least 4 times a year. And again, for the damage prevention, the idea was that installing line markers visible from the previous and the next would ensure that excavators and the public and others knew where the pipeline was going. So that's a line of sight requirement. Clear shorted casings within 1 year of identification. That's both the electrolytic and metallic direct shorts. There is some discussion here about it if it's not feasible or practicable type of language, that some justification may be provided on what mitigations actions may be taken. But those would need to be justified and documented pretty specifically. A class location study must be performed each year on each segment. Looking for those, since we are already in an area where population has grown, the expectation is that we would be looking around it, expecting that population may continue to grow in that area. Also, when pipe's exposed and the coatings removed, we must examine the pipe and weld surfaces with non-destructive inspection for cracking. Cracking's been a big concern of PHMSA over the last 10 or 15 years, and these requirements to inspect the pipe when exposed are becoming more frequent. We also must reassess and remediate as the pipe is as the eligible class 3 segments in our integrity management program as an HCA, but also per any other requirements per 192-611A4. So let's look at these recurring requirements and see how they compare versus previous requirements. So this is where change would need to occur in the procedures for these specific segments. Gas quality, it's prescribed limitations now in that eligible class 3 segment versus the determination by the operator that corrosive gas is not being transported, and or if it is identified that investigation and steps have been taken to minimize internal corrosion, there are prescribed limitations. Following up on the close interval survey, it is prescriptively at 7 years, except when previously it was when needed to evaluate the effectiveness of the CP. For patrols, once each month, versus previously varying on the class 3 location, 4 times a year to twice a year. Leak surveys, 4 times a year for that eligible class 3 segment versus twice a year previously for a class 3 pipe. Line markers are now line of sight rather than having more performance-based requirements. Shorted casings, instead of clear or monitor based on the O&M procedure, it must be cleared within 1 year of identification. Class location surveys. We talked about that one. We're going to be doing that annually rather than when some other programs such as continuing surveillance or an OM&I task that's being performed indicates that there is information that population density is increasing. It is a prescriptive annual requirement. And those in situ inspections rather than whether regardless of whether cracking is known or not to be present in the area, you will be looking for cracks on pipes and weld surfaces when the pipe's exposed. And then the reassess and remediate. Many class 3 sections are not a high consequence area based on the use of the potential impact radius or circle. Now that eligible class 3 segment is an HCA. So we are going to manage these eligible class 3 segments as HCA under the new rule. And the definition of HCA has been revised. It also includes in 192.903 that area within a potential impact circle containing an eligible class 3 segment with its MAOP confirmed under A4. So PHMSA is grabbing some more HCAs. The estimate in the rule is 0.6%, so less than 1% increase in HCA mileage, but yes. There's some other requirements here. We're now, remember, in A4 III or 3 I's. So now we've gone through the baseline, the recurring, and now we're in sort of a few extra topics. Now, one extra topic is the incorporated by reference of API 1163, which is for inline inspection systems qualification. Great standard. I've been around, been utilized by many operators for a while. Originally, PHMSA had talked about in the NPRM requiring a level 3 validation. Well, that's been discussed and justification given that a level 2 validation is sufficient, and it needs to yield verification of 80% confidence level based on the number of anomalies that are evaluated and compared to from the field measurements to the ILI measurements, or 100% anomaly verification, whichever requires fewer validation measurements. So that is now a prescribed standard for use in the ILI remediation and verification program. Direct assessment is flat out. It cannot be used in an integrity assessment method. This rule really requires the use of inline inspection to meet its safety goals and is a gate through which the segment, the eligible class 3 segment must pass. So no direct assessment appropriate. And then for immediate and not immediate, for 1 year and monitor conditions, you have to use a 1.39 MAOP predicted failure pressure calculation for the class 1 design pipe in eligible class 3 segments. Now, if a leak or rupture occurs, it's a very bad thing for the eligible class 3 segment that is in the program. It requires a reconfirmation, and that reconfirmation must follow the previous 3 methods and be completed within 24 months of the event. It's really recommended that for those segments that are going to go into this program, that a lot of work is put on the front end to make sure that it can be operated leak-free and, of course, rupture-free. One of the notes in the preamble is that it's even for pipe-to-pipe connections that this leakage event, this in-service leakage event, could be accredited with requiring this reconfirmation. So it's really best to make sure the eligible class 3 segment is fully investigated and repaired prior to putting it in the program. We talked about records a little bit, and these are for the life of the pipeline. And similar to the IM rule, it requires that justifications and other actions be documented. And I think with an eligible class 3 segment, it would probably even get a little more scrutiny. And those requirements are in 611A4. But when I see this type of a requirement, and we talked about 2 initial requirements, we talked about the CP test stations and depth of cover, and we talked about 2 recurring requirements, the line markers and the shorted casings. I think when moving through those, and possibly even some of the others, an operator would be well suited to create some sort of a position paper and or procedure about how you are going to work through any issues you might find with this particular requirement. And I think that really saves a lot on the front end on the justification, and it ensures consistent application of the process you're employing. And then it's on a case by case or scenario by scenario event that we now must develop and document those actions for that particular case. I think that would really save a lot of missteps and confusion on the front end. So you might consider looking at those baseline and required and recurring requirements where some actions can be documented and discussed, flow charts, et cetera, to make sure we're moving consistently through a decision or justification and applying that to each event uniquely. Some specified minimum yield strength constraints. We're not talking about alternate MAOP pipelines. So the MAOP for an eligible class 3 segment must not exceed that 72% SMICE with a class 1 design factor, and likewise 60% SMICE for a class 2 design factor. Sort of the last programmatic constraint, as we've been going through these last few slides, is that it's for transmission only, fairly obvious. You can only apply this MAOP confirmation fourth method to gas transmission, eligible class 3 segment, not for gathering or distribution lines. Now we'll get into the last bit of the revision and new text on 192.611D. This is the confirmation requirements that following that class location change, an operator must revise and confirm the MAOP within 24 months of the 609 study. And a temporary pressure reduction during the 24-month period does not prevent the operator from later establishing the MAOP under 611A3 or restoring the MAOP under 611A4. That's what we'll talk about next. So if we've taken that pressure reduction, we're now going to have a 2 years to be able to go back and look at that pipeline to see if we can restore the MAOP per 611A4. And if we do choose to try to restore that MAOP for an eligible class 3 segment, one that a pressure reduction has been taken in the past as the pipeline moved from a class 1 or 2 to a class 3, and we've taken a pressure reduction, within the next 2 years, an operator must comply with the uprating B1 and 2 on the pressure test, records review, making sure the pipeline's suitable, and then if the pressure is upped in 192.555E, that pressure is incremented slowly and safely. You must meet all the Subpart O requirements for the MAOP increase. So thoroughly review the integrity of the line, look at the records, look at previous pressure tests, and any inline inspection results and repairs that need to be made. an overall integrity evaluation, and then complete all the requirements, those initial requirements, 611A4I, by March 16th of 2028. And then you would have an eligible class 3 segment. If those were successfully all performed, you could then move into the 611A4 II recurring requirements. So we can see the timelines on these are fairly quick. Kind of keeps with that 24-month idea that once I identified a class location change, I'd had 24 months to do the study and do something about it. And that was retained in this rule in terms of getting those baselines done and then starting your recurring. So that concludes our webinar on the MAOP restoration. And I think we're ready now to move to any questions that might have been submitted. Really appreciate everybody's attendance today and time taken to go through this. Tried to do it in a nice, brisk manner. And let's see, we're getting those questions set up. Q&A. See what we've got. We don't have any posts yet. Does anybody, if anybody has some questions or comments, be great to post that or start raising your hand and then unmute and ask. Okay, Rico.
Hey, Chris and Derek, can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. Hey, thank you for taking the time out to present to us. I'm fairly new into regulatory compliance. Will this PowerPoint be sent out via email the same way the invite was?
Yes, it will.
Okay, good deal.
Excellent. And feel free to contact us if you have any questions.
Will do. I appreciate it.
Sophia?
Hi, this is Sophia, Chesapeake Utilities. I have a question around what PHMSA, I know there's a, definition they put out in the FAQ about piggable lines, what they consider piggable lines. And in this context, does, a line that has previously been inspected by ILI, does that fit into that context? They talked about in the FAQ that if it's constructed post 1994, then it should have been constructed in a way that is capable of accommodating a pig. So then anything post 1994 should be piggable and then should fit this criteria you talked about today.
Yes, I think even beyond that, it's just a requirement to enter the gate, that it must be piggable. And the assumption is that an operator has an HCA nearby and or that this is a piggable segment. And that the pig should be able to pass through, hopefully. That was kind of part of the discussion in the cost analysis. But I think that it's got to be piggable regardless of its date of construction. And if direct assessment may not be used, so that's just one where we would not be able to go to. Let's see, Bill Bird popped up next.
Hi, Chris. A great presentation. I learned some stuff, even though I've studied the rule before. Building off the question we had earlier, and I don't think the rule is very clear about this, but maybe you can add some color to it. Let's say you got a pipeline that has been pigged. Okay, before it went from class 1 to class 3. Does an operator need to run a new smart pig during that 24-month period and then, find and remediate any actionable anomalies, or can they rely on the previous smart pig run? And like I said,
you can rely upon a previous smart pig run within the previous 24 months to the effective date of the rule. And that was chosen because then it's expected that the conditions of the pipeline would have not substantially changed. As a result of that pig run within 24 months of the effective date of the rule, the operator would need to apply the repair criteria and considering it at a HCA and make any remediations, and then kick into those baseline, considering that a baseline assessment, kick into the rest of the baseline requirements.
Well, you're better than I thought. That sounds great. Thank you.
It's like Shelley Myers.
You're on mute if you're speaking.
Okay.
Sorry, is it working now?
It's working now, Shelley.
Okay, so sorry about that. If we have a an eligible class 3 segment that was originally designed to class 1, and we are doing all of their initial requirements and the ongoing requirements, if we had a line strike or any other reason had to replace part of that pipe, would we still be able to replace the pipe consistent with the class 1 design pipe that it will be surrounded by?
That is a great question, Shelley. I think my initial reaction is that that's the case, but I would need to look into that because so much of the other requirements, such as the depth of cover, as an example, says the original design of the pipe, and other things are like that it relies upon that original design. Excuse me. So I'm thinking that my initial reaction is going to be yes, but I would need to confirm that and do some more research. Is that something I can reach out to you later on?
Okay, that would be great.
All right. Was the line strike excavation related?
Let's say in this scenario, would say yes. But I mean, really any reason to have to replace the pipe along the way, if we had an ILI and had something, well, that doesn't count, but so excavation damage. And kind of the concern is, my thought is also everything says, the original class 1 design, and to actually tie in a pipe that was designed class 3 to class 1 pipe might be problematic. So I just wasn't sure if that had been brought up.
Yeah, I think it would be safer to do like thicknesses and grades and all that with similar chemical compositions, and certainly be easier to support your welding procedure that way. But let me think about that, and I'll get back to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Brian, we have you up next.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. I got 2 questions. Number 1, the code requirement on within 24 months of experiencing an in-service leak or rupture. Do you guys feel like it's for any reason, any leak, any threat, including like a line strike that was just brought up, then the operator will lose the class 3 eligibility? Once they've made it eligible, they've gone through all the initial requirements and all the programmatic requirements. Is PHMSA saying that any future leak or rupture loses that ability to use this new regulation, has to reconfirm its MAOP following A1 through A3?
That is, I think the preamble is important to read here, and it said including pipe to pipe connections. So I think equipment, an equipment leak, I think that may be justifiable. But if we're talking about pipe integrity, something that's ILIable, or I think the answer is yes. But that's where I would evaluate the scenario and try to come up with an idea of whether I could not apply that last section.
Yeah. The line strikes are what concerned me. Something that would out of the operator control from a third party, right?
Yeah, I don't think the line strike is going to be applicable with all the discussion about damage prevention and how it's not preventable by ILI technology, and I mean that's what all the extra damage prevention things are supposed to do.
Right.
The extra requirements, I think there may be some room there to contact your local regulator at PHMSA. And I don't know that I'd be wanting to put in an interpretation, because then it would be sort of written in stone, but
Right.
certainly exhaust all available communication sources.
Yeah. And then my second question is about the restoration of MAOP. You mentioned on the slide that we have until 2028, I believe. Are you talking about say for instance, an operator reduced its MAOP because of a class 3 change in the past, whether it's last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, are we saying that operators have the ability within the next 2 years on reevaluating and doing all the requirements in A4 to restore that MAOP to its previous level?
That's correct. Yeah, it would be the uprate plus the Subpart O and the A4. And so you've got 2 years to find all those D rates and get them done. It's interesting that I think there was some contention about whether that part should be put in the code. Many people were against it, but it got in there, and it's like, here's your one-time chance. That's how I see it.
Okay, thanks.
Next one was Niaz.
Niaz, did you still have a question?
I hope you can hear me. I have a
Yes.
question about the period mentioned, like 24 months. What are the bases of these 24 months? And the second question is regarding the location class study after a year period. So that also another question. So basically about these two periods mentioned, what are the bases for this one? Are we following straight away the codes? Or logically speaking, why not or more than this period or less than this period? So can you elaborate on this one?
Yes, it is interesting. They chose 24 months. It's similar to what's in the current class location study requirements that identifying within 24 months of the class location change, you have to perform your study and started identifying your actions or taking the pressure reduction. So I think that's the basis for it. And I think some of the that's probably enough said there. And what was the location question? Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, location, there is a survey like after a year, there is a requirement of survey after 1 year. I think there was one slide I'm recalling.
In terms of the coding survey?
No, location class study in terms of population and
yeah, the annual class location survey.
Yes.
Yeah, that would need to be performed annually.
Annually, yes, that is yeah. So again, another additional question, like we are doing a particular task at this moment, but just generally speaking, maybe a similar question I wonder that for a general pipeline built for 20 years, do we do the location class study after its design and operation once it is taken into the, because around that the buildings may change. Buildings, we may have additional buildings. So normally, is there any studies going on? Like,
well, an operator is required to 192.613 continuing surveillance to keep looking for change along their pipeline. And also during normal OM&I activities out on the right-of-way, operations, maintenance, and inspection tasks on the right-of-way, information may also be gathered that indicates that there has been a class location change, and then a class location change study would need to be implemented.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We have a question in the Q&A.
We got one in the Q&A. Let's see what we've got. Are there any recommendations regarding the use of concrete or polymer slabs in the case of change of location class? I guess we're discussing the depth of cover, and if we have that, if we do go in and have a we're going to utilize make it an eligible class 3 segment that no longer meets the depth of cover requirements of its original design. And some of the text in the preamble discuss some of the problems operators identify with line lowering and putting that amount of strain and change into the pipe, that it can cause other issues. And that's where the use of safety and of slabs or coverings on the ground to prevent damage were definitely identified as viable alternatives. Now, those do not require notification. And that's why I recommended that when you're in some of these, the test stations, the depth of cover, the line markers, the shorted casings, things that do not require notification to PHMSA, that you make sure that you're well justified and documented in all of them. So if you are going to use polymer slabs, that may be in your procedures, that when I identify a depth of cover issue, you could then, on the justification for this area, kick yourself into that procedure or position paper, and then document the particulars of the site where you are performing this protection. I assume that was the question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any more questions?
It's been a great 50 minutes. And we'll give a few minutes in case anybody, or a minute, and just remind everybody what a great Thursday it is in Houston. Besides the oak pollen, we have the Houston Open golf tournament, the Astros season opener against the Angels, and then we've got the University of Houston and the University of Texas playing basketball tonight. Big Thursday. All right, well, I think that's the end of it. And thanks everybody for your attention and time. And contact us with any questions you may have. Have a great rest of the day.
This video is brought to you by RCP and the Pipeline Safety Institute.